You don't notice the moment someone starts drifting away from you, until one day, they're close enough to touch, but somehow already gone. I used to think that silence was harmless, that it was just the absence of noise, a neutral space where nothing happened. But these days, silence feels like a slow suffocation, a fog that settles over everything I do, every thought I try to push away. I wake up next to someone who used to feel like a home, and now it feels like waking beside a stranger I once loved with every part of me. The clock ticks in the early morning darkness, and I lie there, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this is how relationships die, quietly, without a fight, without one final argument that explains everything. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when her laugh felt like sunlight and my whole day revolved around the idea of hearing it again. I remember when we used to stay up way too late, talking about every tiny hope, every stupid fear, every dream we didn't dare say out loud to anyone else. Back then, we couldn't stop talking. Now, we barely start. Our conversations have shrunk to functional fragments. Did you lock the door? What time will you be home? Can you pick up milk? Words that mean nothing and say everything about where we are. Sometimes I tell myself it's just a phase, that every relationship hits this kind of wall eventually, that routine dulls everyone. But the truth is, it's not routine that scares me. It's the feeling that she's drifting somewhere I can't reach, like she's slipping through my fingers no matter how tightly I hold on. There's a heaviness in her movements, a tiredness in her eyes that she thinks I don't notice. She's here, but she's not with me, and the distance grows even when we sit on the same couch. Last night, when she came home late again, I pretended to be asleep. I listened to the way she put her keys down, the slow footsteps that didn't match the rhythm of someone relieved to be home. She lingered in the hallway, like she had to gather courage before walking into our bedroom. Maybe she thought I'd ask where she'd been. Maybe she hoped I wouldn't. When she finally slipped into bed, her back turned toward me almost instantly. And the silence between us felt like a wall so thick I could barely breathe. In the mornings, I rehearse what I want to say. I imagine taking a deep breath and telling her that I miss her, that I miss us, that I'm scared of what we're becoming. But when she finally opens her eyes and looks at me, the words collapse before they reach my mouth. Her face is a tired mask, guarded, distant, and I'm afraid that if I speak, everything will break. So instead I smile, pretend everything is fine, and ask if she wants coffee. She always says yes, but not because she wants to talk. It's because coffee fills the silence better than I can. What haunts me the most is the idea that maybe she's already made up her mind. Maybe she's just waiting for the right moment to say the words that will split my world in half. Maybe she's staying because it's easier than leaving. And maybe I'm doing the same. The thought terrifies me, because I still love her with a kind of stubborn loyalty I don't know how to turn off. And yet, every day I feel myself bracing for impact, waiting for something, anything, to tell me whether I'm fighting for something that still exists or just the ghost of what we once were. This morning, as I watched her tie her hair in front of the mirror, she didn't meet my eyes. She didn't even notice I was watching her. And for a moment, just a brief, painful moment, I wondered if she'd look different walking out the door for the last time. If she'd even say goodbye. The feeling tightened around my chest until I had to look away. Maybe today will be the day something shifts. Maybe I'll finally say something. Or maybe things will continue exactly like this, two people circling each other in a house that feels too small for all the words we never say. Either way, I can feel it, something is coming. A break, a confession, an ending, or a beginning. I don't know which one I'm terrified of more. That evening, when I heard the door open, something inside me tightened, the same instinctive pull I felt before every conversation that might turn into a confrontation. I told myself not to overthink it. Not to jump to conclusions, but my mind had already begun stitching together worries out of thin air. She walked in quietly, too quietly, like someone trying not to disturb a sleeping animal. I was sitting at the kitchen table, pretending to read, though the same sentence had been staring back at me for almost 20 minutes. "Hey," she said, her voice light, but not warm. "Hey," I answered, lifting my eyes slowly, watching her shrug off her coat without looking in my direction. Something about the way she moved felt rehearsed, as if she'd practiced these gestures somewhere else before bringing them home. She placed her phone face down on the counter, which she never used to do. It was a tiny detail, but it landed like a blow. "How was your day?" I asked. A simple question, a normal question, one any couple might ask without thinking. But in our home, it had become an impossible one, cracked with hidden meaning. "Fine," she replied, the word sharp, clipped, closed. Then she added, "Just tired." She used to tell me everything, every frustration, every embarrassing moment, every weird little interaction. Now I get one-word answers like she's rationing information. And I never know whether it's me she's protecting or herself. We ate dinner in a muted silence that buzzed louder than any argument. I tried to bring up neutral topics, music, work, a stupid video I'd seen earlier, but everything died between us before it had a chance to spark. She kept glancing at her phone, even though the screen stayed dark, like she was waiting for a message she didn't want me to see. When I finally asked if something was wrong, she shook her head too quickly. Later, when she went to take a shower, her phone lit up on the counter. Instinct made me look before I could stop myself, not touching it, just staring at the light. A name I didn't recognize. A preview of a message I couldn't read from across the room. I froze. Part of me wanted to walk over and flip the phone around, confront the truth head-on. Another part of me knew I wasn't ready for whatever I'd find. So I stayed where I was, gripping my own hands to keep from reaching. When she came back, the phone was still face down. I watched her slip it into her pocket as if it were a fragile secret she needed to protect. She caught me watching and offered a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. It faded faster than it appeared. That night, when we lay in bed, both facing opposite directions, I felt the weight of that unknown message pressing on my chest. It wasn't proof of anything, not on its own, but it scratched at a part of my mind that had been whispering doubts for weeks. Every silence, every late arrival, every forced conversation braided into a pattern I didn't want to admit was forming. Are we okay? I finally asked in the dark, unable to hold the words in. She didn't answer right away. The kind of pause that becomes a wound. Then she sighed, soft but pained. I don't know, she said. My heart sank. Not because it was a bad answer, but because it was an honest one. What does that mean? I asked. My voice cracked more than I expected. It means I'm confused, she whispered. I feel like I'm disappearing. Like we stopped seeing each other. The irony hit hard. I wanted to tell her I've been trying to see her, that I've been searching for her in every moment, but she keeps fading further away. But instead of saying any of that, I stayed quiet, afraid that pushing too hard might break whatever fragile honesty she had just offered. She turned toward me, though the darkness made it impossible to read her expression. I don't want to fight, she added. I'm just tired. Of everything. I didn't know if everything meant work, life, or us. I didn't dare ask. The bed felt colder than it ever had before, and even though we lay inches apart, the distance felt immeasurable. I stayed awake long after her breathing steadied, staring into the dark, wondering how a relationship starts to unravel. Is it a single moment like this, a missed answer, a cracked silence? Or is it 1,000 tiny fractures we ignore until suddenly there's nothing left holding us together? I didn't know which scared me more, the thought that she was already halfway gone. Or the possibility that I'd been half asleep while everything fell apart. The next morning, I woke before she did, something that had become a habit without my noticing. I lay still, watching the soft rise and fall of her breathing, wondering how many more mornings I'd get to see her like this. Peaceful. Unaware. Distant. I thought about waking her, about asking her to stay home so we could talk, really talk, but the fear of hearing something I couldn't unhear kept me frozen. So instead, I slipped out of bed quietly and made coffee, listening to the quiet hum of the machine like it might drown out my thoughts. She joined me a few minutes later, wrapped in a towel, hair dripping, eyes tired but softer than they'd been the night before. She murmured a faint good morning as she reached for a mug, not looking directly at me but not avoiding me either. That small difference felt like a miracle I couldn't trust. We should talk, I said, before I could stop myself. She paused, the spoon in her hand stilled halfway to the sugar jar. For a second, she looked like she might run, like the weight of the conversation threatened to crush her. Then she nodded slowly. Yeah, she whispered. We should. We didn't talk right away. Instead, we sat across from each other at the kitchen table, steam rising between us like ghosts of all the words we'd swallowed over the past months. I searched her face for something, anger, guilt, longing, anything, but her expression was unreadable, a quiet mask built from exhaustion and uncertainty. I'm sorry, I said first, even though I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. Maybe for not seeing her sooner. Maybe for seeing her too clearly now. She closed her eyes briefly. I'm sorry too, she said. For shutting you out. For not knowing how to fix things. Her voice trembled on that last word. Fix. As if we were something broken on a workbench, waiting for the right tools, the right hands, the right timing. But relationships aren't objects. They don't break cleanly. They fracture slowly, in places we don't notice until they're too deep to ignore. I need you to tell me what's going on, I said gently. I can't keep guessing. She hesitated, then wrapped her fingers around her mug like she needed the warmth to steady herself. I feel like I'm disappearing, she said again, her voice steadier now. I go to work, I come home, and I don't know who I am in between. I don't know who we are either, not anymore. Her words pierced me, but not in the way I expected. They didn't feel like accusations. They felt like confessions, fragile truths she'd held onto so long they'd begun to rot inside her. I never meant for you to feel that way, I said. I just thought, you were distant because you needed space. I didn't want to push. You didn't push, she said quietly. But you didn't reach for me either. She looked at me then, really looked, and the hurt in her eyes made my throat tighten. And I didn't reach for you. We both just drifted. The word echoed between us. Drifted. A slow, unintentional separation, like two boats tied to the same dock but pulled apart by different currents. I didn't know what to say. So I said the one thing that had been sitting heavy in my chest for weeks. Is there someone else? Her reaction was immediate, a flinch, a widening of the eyes, a sharp inhale. Not the reaction of someone lying. It was the reaction of someone wounded by the question itself. No, she said firmly, almost angrily. There's no one else. Don't turn this into that. I felt heat rise in my face, shame, relief, and something harsher I couldn't name. I'm sorry, I said quickly. I didn't, you've been distant, and the messages. She cut me off. The messages are work. I've been avoiding telling you how overwhelmed I am, how much I hate where I am right now. I didn't want you to worry. And I didn't want you to think I was failing. Her voice broke on the last word. Failing. God, I wanted to reach across the table, take her hands, tell her she wasn't failing anything. But I hesitated, afraid that touch might feel like pressure instead of comfort. You're not failing, I said softly. You're struggling. And you're allowed to. She blinked, tears gathering but not falling. I didn't want to be another burden, she whispered. You're not a burden, I said, the words coming out rough. You've never been. For the first time in months, something cracked open between us, not a break, but an opening. A chance. A beginning. Or the beginning of the end. I couldn't tell yet. But as we sat there in the fragile quiet, sharing truths we'd both been too afraid to say out loud, I felt something shift inside me. A small spark of hope. And a much larger wave of fear. Because honesty doesn't fix things on its own. Sometimes it saves you. Sometimes it destroys you. And I had no idea which way we were heading. For the rest of the day, her words stayed with me like a pulse beneath my skin. Every sentence replayed itself: I'm disappearing. I didn't want to be a burden. We drifted. They echoed in my mind as I moved through my routines, hollow and slow, as if my body continued pretending everything was normal while my heart tried to understand the quiet disaster unfolding between us. Honesty had cracked us open, but the truth didn't tell me whether we were breaking apart or finally making space to rebuild. When evening came, she sent a text saying she'd be home late again. This time, though, instead of the familiar stab of suspicion, I felt something different: an ache, a heaviness, but also a strange clarity. I didn't want to spend another night waiting in the quiet, drowning in unanswered questions and fears amplified by imagination. I realized if we were going to fix anything, if there was anything left to fix, I had to stop hiding behind silence just as much as she did. So when she finally walked through the front door, shoulders slumped, exhaustion clouding her eyes, I didn't pretend to be busy or distracted. I didn't bury myself in a book or in the kitchen or behind the comfort of routine. I just stood there, in the middle of the living room, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Can we talk? I asked softly. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it for a moment, as if standing up straight required too much energy. Yeah, she said. If you're ready. It struck me then that she wasn't being cold. She was overwhelmed. And maybe all of this distance, all the tension, all the unanswered questions had been less about her pulling away from me and more about her pulling away from a version of herself that no longer felt real. We sat on the couch, not touching, but closer than we had been in weeks. The air felt heavy but alive with possibility, dangerous, fragile possibility. She stared at her hands, twisting her fingers together nervously. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I don't want us to keep circling around the same things, I said. If something's wrong, if something's missing, I need you to tell me. I can handle the truth. I just can't handle not knowing what's happening to us. She nodded slowly, swallowing hard. You're right, she said. You deserve the truth. And I deserve to stop hiding. She looked up at me then, and the rawness in her eyes startled me. It wasn't distance I saw there, it was fear. Fear of breaking something she still cared about. Fear of admitting something she had been burying for far too long. I'm unhappy, she said simply. The words fell between us like stones. Heavy. Unavoidable. Not because of you. Not because of us. Not exactly. I'm unhappy because I don't recognize my life anymore. I don't recognize myself. I felt the breath leave my lungs, but I kept my voice steady. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want to make you feel responsible for fixing me, she said. I didn't want to drag you into something I didn't even understand myself. And part of me thought, if I pretended hard enough, maybe it would go away. But it didn't, I said quietly. She shook her head. It got worse. There were no accusations in her voice, no hidden blame. Just exhaustion. Just honesty. And yet the truth cut deeper than anything I had expected, because it meant the cracks in us weren't caused by one mistake, one fight, one moment. They were caused by the slow erosion of a person who had been drowning beside me while I waited for her to reach for my hand. I should have seen it, I said. I should have asked more. Tried more. I thought giving you space was helping. She let out a shaky breath. And I thought protecting you from my mess was helping. We both made the same mistake. We kept hurting alone instead of together. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was full, but not empty, not the dead, suffocating quiet that had smothered us before. This silence carried something else. Something living. Something possible. I don't know how to fix everything, she said finally. I don't even know where to start. But I don't want to lose you. I don't want us to end like this. Her voice wavered. So did my resolve not to cry. You won't lose me, I whispered. Not if we're both still fighting for this. She looked at me like she was searching for the truth in my face, like she was afraid it might vanish if she blinked. Then, slowly, she reached for my hand. Not with certainty. Not with confidence. But with the fragile, trembling hope of someone stepping back from the edge. The moment her fingers touched mine, something shifted inside me, like a deep breath after holding it for far too long. The ground beneath us wasn't solid yet. But for the first time in months, it wasn't breaking. We sat like that for a long time, hands intertwined, not speaking, just existing in the fragile truce of shared truth. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if we were healing or beginning the hardest part of breaking. But I knew one thing. For the first time in a long time, we were finally facing it together. The days that followed didn't transform us overnight. There was no dramatic breakthrough, no sudden rush of passion sweeping away months of distance. Instead, the change came in small, almost invisible shifts, gentler mornings, softer words, pauses that invited honesty instead of fear. We weren't healed, not even close, but we had finally stopped pretending everything was fine. And in its own quiet way, that honesty felt like the first brick of something we could build on. We started talking more, not forced conversations about solutions or apologies, but simple things: how work felt overwhelming for her, how I'd been carrying a worry I didn't know how to voice, how both of us had missed each other even while living inches apart. These talks didn't magically erase the heaviness between us, but they carved out space where we could breathe again. One night, about a week after everything cracked open, we decided to go for a walk. It was late, the streets empty except for the soft glow of street lamps reflecting on wet pavement. She slid her hand into mine without hesitating, and though it was a small gesture, it felt monumental. Her thumb brushed against my skin like she was trying to remember the shape of something she'd forgotten she loved. I've been thinking a lot, she said quietly as we turned down a quiet street. About us. About me. About how I want things to be. I felt a familiar tension coil in my stomach, the kind that comes before a truth you're not sure you can handle. And? I asked. She took a moment before answering. I don't want to go back to who I was before. I wasn't happy then. But I want us to figure out who we are now. Together. Not by pretending everything is okay, but by admitting when it's not. A strange mix of relief and fear washed over me. It was terrifying to think about rebuilding something without knowing what shape it would take. But the idea of trying, really trying, felt like the first real source of hope I'd had in months. I want that too, I said. I just don't want to lose you again, even for a little while. She stopped walking and turned toward me. Her eyes were clearer than they had been in a long time, no longer clouded by exhaustion or guilt. You didn't lose me, she said. I just lost myself. But I'm finding my way back. Her words hit me with a quiet force, like something deep inside me loosened after being wound too tight for too long. I didn't know if she meant it in a permanent way or simply in this moment, but I believed her. And that belief felt like stepping into sunlight after a long winter. We sat on a bench near the park. The silence between us no longer suffocating, but soft, calm, even gentle. She leaned her head on my shoulder, something she hadn't done in months. The weight of her felt familiar, grounding. I wrapped an arm around her, and she let out a slow breath, the kind that sounds like relief. I've been afraid, she admitted, her voice muffled against my jacket. Afraid that if I told you how unhappy I was, you'd think it was your fault. Or you'd leave. Or, maybe I'd lose the only steady thing I had. I shook my head. I'm not steady because I'm perfect. I'm steady because I care. Because I'm here. Because I want to be here. She smiled softly at that, and for the first time, the smile reached her eyes. We talked for hours, about fears we'd held onto for too long, about dreams we'd forgotten, about the version of our relationship we wanted to build now that we had stopped running from the truth. It wasn't easy, some confessions hurt, some stung, some forced us to see parts of ourselves we would have preferred to ignore. But honesty had become a habit we were trying to nurture, slowly and carefully. When we finally walked home, her arm wrapped around mine, the night didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt open. Uncertain, yes, but open. Back inside, she turned to me and brushed her fingers against my cheek, a gesture so tender it brought an ache to my chest. I know this isn't a fix, she said.